Now let's talk about the group of people who will be benefiting the most from these updates in the terms of actual cash in hand benefits that they're going to be receiving into their bank accounts. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, and just yesterday the Canadian government released their fall fiscal update, and it contained a whole bunch of new information pertaining to Canadians and their money, and also benefits that they could be expecting to see in the future. Now, the specific details of this fall fiscal update come in the form of a 200+ page document that we're going to be going over some of the information on this channel over the next couple of days so that you don't have to read this huge document. But in today's video, we're going to touch on the most impactful things for you in regards to this update. So as a result, in today's video, we're not going to go super in depth on these individual projects and these individual programs, but instead we're going to do sort of an overview of what you can expect in the coming months and years and how it could affect you. If you're somebody who could be interested in some of these more fine details, then I'd recommend subscribing to this channel, because in the coming days we're going to be going over all of these programs in more depth and how you can make money on it and how you might be able to save some money based on this information that has just been provided to us. After all, that's exactly what this channel is meant to do: bring information to Canadians as quickly and effectively as possible so that they can set themselves up to live a more financially stable and wealthy future. So if you're into that, make sure to hit all those buttons down there. Now let's get into this new update. The first thing that we're going to touch on when it comes to this fiscal update is the fact that the government has finally brought in some supports for people who work in the arts industries. Now, this was one area that during this pandemic was more hit than other areas, right? We had all of these shows shutting down really quickly right when the pandemic started, and they've been the last to open, and they didn't even restart when we saw more businesses restarting in the summer. So let's take a closer look at exactly what people working in these industries can expect that we've gotten from this new information. Let's take a look at that page. So here we have the actual document that's over 200 pages that pertains to all of these updates. Like I said, I'm not going over everything. We're just going to touch on the sort of top level stuff for each of these categories. And right here it says on this topic of arts workers that to support the planning and preservation of COVID-19 safe events and the arts, including both live and digital, and to provide work opportunities in these sectors, the government will provide $181.5 million in 2021 to 2022 to the Department of Canadian Heritage and the Canada Council for the Arts to expand their funding programs. This includes a one-year renewal of funding provided in Budget 2019 for the Building Communities Through Arts and Heritage Program, the Canada Arts Preservation Fund, and the Canada Music Fund. And here they go on to say that the government will also provide additional COVID-19 relief to local television and radio stations by supporting the waiving of broadcasting Part 2 license fees in 2020-2021, which are collected annually by the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, and that waiving these fees will provide up to $50 million in relief to these companies, helping them stay afloat during COVID. Now, when it comes to supporting these arts industries, something is definitely better than nothing, but I'm guessing if you work in the arts industry, you likely won't be too impressed by this kind of funding method. You'll notice here in this first part that the funding isn't going directly to workers, but instead it's going to various sort of committees and councils who decide whether or not to fund certain projects or to give money via the form of grants to individual artists or any sort of artistic endeavor that somebody could apply for with these councils. If you work in the arts industry, you'll definitely know that it's important to get funding from these sort of committees and councils in order to continue working on your projects. So it seems like it'll be more of the same of that for the future in the next year. It's just that it may be more likely that your project may be funded during these times because of the additional funding going to these decision makers. There are, however, problems with this because there's not as much governance over who is making these decisions within these bodies, right? Like we have people making decisions that sort of overweigh the value of one art versus another. So for some people who work in maybe a niche sort of form of arts in that sort of industry, then it could be more difficult to get this funding. Like I know that there's a lot of support for Western classical music as opposed to some other forms of music, and I just know that from being a part of the music scene in Toronto for a while there a couple years ago. Now, this section likely isn't pertinent to a lot of people who are watching this because it's basically a support for television and radio stations stations so that they don't have to pay the licensing fees that they would have had to pay in the past, and this will just help them spend less on their day-to-day operation costs. So that will be helpful, and maybe keeping some staff on at these radio stations and television stations that may otherwise have been laid off. And this bottom section is just talking about how the government is going to give $50 million in short-term compensation for film industries. So it's saying here that it's not actually going to be funding for the film industries, but more so protection against liability if there's any sort of COVID outbreak while they're doing this work and filming these television programs or movies. As I was saying before, something is better than nothing when it comes to funding for the arts. But if you're working in this industry, it's likely you won't be too impressed with this because it's nothing that's actually going directly to you, rather something that could trickle down in the form of jobs or grants for the projects you're working on. It seems that these industry-specific benefits won't be as cash in hand as some of the other benefits that Canadians have received over the past months to help them get through this difficult time. Except for one group of Canadians that will be getting some actual cash in hand funding, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But for now, let's talk about something that could heavily affect the Canadian job market. Now, this is going to be important to you if you're on any of these benefits, the CRB, the CRCB, the CRSB, as many of these require you to actually be looking for work and looking for a job in order to receive these benefits. So you're going to be constantly applying to new jobs, and this is something that could open up that job market and potentially provide some employment for you. You might remember that a little while ago, the government announced the CEWS, and that stands for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And this helps businesses to pay their employees even though they're making less money as a business. It seems that there could be some changes coming to this program that could provide you, if you have a job, with more security in your position, making it less likely for your employer to need to lay you off. Let's take a look at the document and exactly what it says. This section just talks a little bit about what the government has already done in terms of this, but here's the new information. They say that recognizing that we will face a difficult winter with the second wave and that public health restrictions pose ongoing challenges to employers, the government wants to make sure businesses and workers have the support they need in the coming months. And here's the kicker. Given the ferocity of the second wave and its expected economic impact, the government is proposing to increase the maximum subsidy rate to 75% for the period beginning December 20th, 2020, and to extend this rate until March 13th, 2021 to provide greater certainty for employers. Now, they say this is to provide greater certainty to employers, but as an extension, it also provides greater certainty to employees. If the business you work for is able to subsidize more of their wages that they're paying out to employees, then it's less likely they're going to have to lay you off. And as a result, they also may be more inclined to take on some more staff. So if you're unemployed right now, you may have a better chance now than you did just before this was announced to be hired. Because if an employee thinks, or rather an employer thinks, that they are going to be able to be subsidized to bring you on, then it's more likely that they're going to actually go down this route of bringing on extra staff to help them maybe throughout this holiday season. The next bit of information that was included in this update is something that's getting a lot of attention, and some people are coining it as the Netflix tax, and this could actually end up with you paying a little bit more than you were before. But let's get into exactly what this is, and then we'll talk about how this could be a good thing but might also be a bad thing. The words they use in the actual update are that foreign-based vendors with no physical presence in Canada, think Netflix or maybe Amazon, do not currently have to charge the GST/HST on the sales of digital products or services like mobile apps, online video gaming, and video and music streaming. This has put Canadian vendors of digital products and services at a distinct competitive disadvantage. So they're suggesting that to level the playing field, the government proposes that foreign-based vendors selling digital products or services to consumers in Canada be required to register for, collect, and remit GST/HST on their taxable sales to Canadian consumers. So to simplify this a little bit, if you're a big company that sells digital services or digital streaming like Spotify, Netflix, Amazon Prime, these sort of services that provide digital products and don't actually require a physical presence in Canada, currently they're not required to remit GST or HST when they sell these digital products. But if these new policies are put into place, they actually will be required to remit this GST and HST and pay that to the government to, help to fund programs. And they're saying that they could actually make over $1 billion by implementing this tax over the next 5 years. But some critics are saying this isn't really solving any sort of problem with these companies, because when there's a GST or HST implemented, they'll just charge that to the consumer and then remit that and give it to the government. So really what's happening here in the eyes of many people is that there's going to be an added tax that you're going to have to pay for these services that you weren't having to pay before. So does it really touch on that issue of sort of taxing these large corporations who are undertaxed in Canada right now? I'll let you think about that and decide on it for yourself, but it seems like it's at least a step in the right direction on this. Now, along the same sort of lines as this digital tax, which will affect things like Netflix and Amazon and Spotify, they're also implementing a mandatory tax on short-term rentals. Now, you can think VRBO or Airbnb when I say short-term rentals. These suggested policy changes say that all Airbnb owners and operators need to start remitting this GST and HST tax to pay back to the government at tax time. Now, this could affect Airbnb a little bit differently, because already, as of right now, many Airbnb hosts are already doing this, because if they're making over $30,000 a year from their Airbnb, they're already required by the government to remit this tax. So this will only be for the small sort of mom and pop Airbnb owners who are now going to be required to remit this GST and HST. But again, it really just trickles down to the Canadian consumer, because if you own an Airbnb, you'll add this GST, HST fee, and that'll be something that the guests will have to pay and will just have to be collected and remitted until tax time. So apart from generating extra revenue for the government, it really doesn't do a lot in terms of helping out the everyday Canadian. More so, it may increase prices. Now let's talk about the group of people who will be benefiting the most from these updates in the terms of actual cash in hand benefits that they're going to be receiving into their bank accounts. And it's a group of people that have been getting a lot more support recently, and that's any parents out there. There have been increases to the amount of support the government is going to give you in 2021 in terms of caring for your child. And this could be up to $1,200 extra per child for 2021. Let's take a closer look at who could qualify for this extra $1,200 per child by taking a look at the text of this document that we've been looking at. Let's go look at it. It says here that many families have been struggling with wide ranges of expenses during the pandemic, from providing care to buying tools for at-home learning like books and technology. Many families with young children also had to find temporary alternatives to their regular childcare arrangements, which for many meant higher costs. Now, they're saying that in order to provide immediate relief for families with young children, the government proposes to introduce temporary support totaling $1,200 in 2021 for each child under the age of 6 for low and middle income families who are entitled to the Canada Child Benefit. This represents almost 20% increase over the maximum annual CCB or Canada Child Benefit payment. This support would automatically be delivered to families entitled to the CCB with net income at or below $120,000 as 4 tax-free payments of $300, assumedly going out across the duration of the year. And it's saying that families entitled to the CCB with this net income below, or rather above $120,000 would receive only half of that, $150, 4 times throughout the year for a total of $600. Now, the typical Canada Child Benefit goes up to people that are all the way up to age 17. You can receive some extra money to help you out in raising your kid. But right now, this additional funding is only for people who have children that are age 6 and below. They are the people who will be getting this $1,200 over the course of 2021 just to help them out in making ends meet during this tough economic time, especially tough to raise a child, I can only assume. So without getting into too much detail, this covers most of the updates that are most applicable to Canadians and their lives that's found inside of this new fall fiscal update that we just received from the government. However, there is a lot more information inside of this document that could pertain to your individual situation. It's just not included in this video because it may not apply to most people. So if you want to stay updated and make sure that if there's any information about your individual situation that gets updated, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because I'm coming out with updates like this all the time, and especially over the next few days, we're going to be talking more about what you can expect to see from the new policies in this new update. But I'm really curious, what do you have to say about all of this new information? Do you think that they've hit the nail on the head with this update, or are they missing things on a big level? There wasn't as much information about the CRB or the CERB that I was expecting, and in terms of if they're going to extend these benefits come March when they're going to be canceled for a lot of people, depending on when they started receiving them. But let me know, did they cover everything that you expected them to, or is there something that they're definitely missing that they need to include in the future? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that like button and turn it blue, because when you do, this video gets spread to way more people who could potentially benefit from learning more about this type of information. And with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope these sort of update videos will help you out as you sort of try to get a better idea of what's coming down the pipeline for your future and for your money. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time.